17 words. That's all it took to erase 25 years of my life. The email arrived at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. I thought I was losing a job, maybe my identity, certainly my dignity. What I didn't know was that my termination would become the key that unlocked every skeleton they'd buried in their marble-floored boardrooms. They took everything from me with those 17 words. So I returned the favor, with interest compounded over decades of their darkest secrets. My name is Emily Carter. And for 25 years, I was invisible by design. Not the kind of invisible that comes from being overlooked, no. I was the kind of invisible that made everything work. The ghost in the machine at Halden & Co., ensuring that quarterly reports gleamed, that audit trails disappeared when necessary, and that the right numbers always appeared in the right columns at precisely the right time. I grew up in Nebraska, where loyalty meant something. My father worked 43 years at the same grain elevator, and when he retired, they threw him a party that lasted until dawn. That's the world I thought I was entering when I walked through Halden's revolving doors in 1999, fresh from Northwestern with an accounting degree and dreams bigger than cornfields. The Denver skyline had seduced me then, all that glass and steel reaching toward mountains that looked painted against the Colorado blue. Halden & Co. occupied floors 30 through 35 of the Apex Tower. And from my cubicle, on 32, I could see the Rockies on clear days. Richard Halden himself had hired me, his handshake firm as a promise, his smile as warm as his father's portrait hanging in the lobby. "We're a family business," he'd said, though the family in question controlled assets worth more than some small country's GDP. "We take care of our own." And I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. I gave them everything. 60-hour weeks became 70. 70 became whatever it took. I missed my sister's wedding rehearsal to fix a spreadsheet crisis. I spent my 35th birthday alone in the office, reconciling accounts while my friends celebrated without me. I told myself it was temporary. That sacrifice builds foundations. That loyalty would be rewarded. Martha Klein, our head of human resources, used to stop by my desk with her practiced smile and designer coffee. "Emily, you're the backbone of this department," she'd say, her voice honeyed with something I mistook for appreciation. "Where would we be without you?" I know the answer to that now. They'd be exactly where they are, wealthy, protected, and untouchable. Or so they thought. My department handled special accounts, the kind that required what Richard called discretion and finesse. I was good at both. When numbers didn't add up, I made them sing. When transactions needed to vanish, I became a magician. I told myself it was creative accounting, that every major firm did it, that I was protecting jobs and livelihoods. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was protecting criminals in Armani suits. But I didn't see it then. I saw year-end bonuses and glowing performance reviews. I saw Martha's approving nods and Richard's occasional attaboys as validation that I mattered. I saw my corner office, earned after 15 years, as proof that patience and dedication still meant something in corporate America. My life outside Halden's walls gradually faded to sepia. Friends stopped calling after too many declined invitations. Dating became a series of apologetic text messages about working late. Even my cat, Fitzgerald, seemed to recognize me more as a weekend visitor than a permanent resident. "You live to work," my mother said, during what would be our last Thanksgiving together. Her eyes clouded with concern and disappointment. "When did you become someone who works to live?" I didn't have an answer then. I do now. I became that person the moment I confused being needed with being valued. The moment I mistook exploitation for appreciation. The office was my universe, and I knew its rhythms like my own heartbeat. I knew that Richard took his calls from Beijing at 5 a.m. sharp. I knew that Martha kept a bottle of Xanax in her locked drawer, hidden behind folders marked confidential. I knew that the junior analysts whispered about irregularities they couldn't quite place, anomalies that I had learned to smooth over without thinking. I knew so much, and yet I knew nothing at all. They say hindsight is 20/20. Mine is a fucking electron microscope. Every interaction, every casual comment, every sudden meeting cancellation, they all form a pattern now, clear as blood on snow. The signs were there, screaming at me in frequencies I'd trained myself not to hear. But that Tuesday morning, walking into the office with my usual soy latte and my usual confidence that I was indispensable, I still believed in the myth of corporate loyalty. I still believed that 25 years meant something more than a number on a severance check. I was about to learn exactly what those years were worth. 17 words in an email that would arrive in exactly 3 hours, 47 minutes, and 16 seconds. The countdown to my execution had begun, and I was the only one who didn't know it. The email notification popped up while I was reviewing the Henderson acquisition files. The subject line was blank, Martha's signature move when she didn't want to commit anything to digital record. My stomach clenched, a Pavlovian response to years of her calculated communications. Please report to conference room A, immediately. MK. 17 words that would echo in my skull for months afterward. I saved my work, straightened my blazer, and walked the carpeted hallway with the confidence of someone who'd made this walk 1,000 times before. Conference room A was the executive suite, all mahogany and mountain views, where promotions were announced and deals were sealed. Martha sat at the far end of the table, a manila folder placed with surgical precision in front of her. No Richard, no department heads, just Martha, her HR assistant Tyler with his tablet and dead eyes, and a security guard I'd never seen before. The security guard, that should have been my first clue. Emily, please sit, Martha said, her voice stripped of its usual artificial warmth. She didn't look at me, focusing instead on aligning her Mont Blanc pen parallel to the folder's edge. I sat. The leather chair that usually embraced visiting executives felt cold, hostile. I'll get straight to the point, Martha began, finally meeting my eyes with the clinical detachment of an oncologist delivering terminal news. Due to necessary restructuring following recent economic challenges, we're eliminating several positions. Yours is among them. The words hit me in waves, each one a separate impact. Necessary, restructuring, eliminating. The corporate euphemisms for betrayal. I don't understand, I heard myself say, though my voice sounded distant, underwater. The department just posted record profits. I personally handled the Morrison account that brought in. The decision has been made, Martha interrupted, sliding the folder across the table's polished surface. Your severance package is generous, considering 3 months' pay, continued health insurance through year-end, and a neutral reference. Neutral reference, 25 years reduced to neutral. This is effective immediately, she continued, her manicured nails tapping the folder. Security will escort you to your office. You have 15 minutes to collect personal items. Company property remains, including all files, drives, and client contacts. Martha, I said, my voice hardening as shock crystallized into rage. I've been here longer than you. I've covered for this company more times than... That's enough. Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? This isn't personal, Emily. It's business. 25 years isn't personal? I stood, my hands flat on the table, leaning forward. I know where every body is buried in this place, Martha. Every tax dodge, every offshore account, every... I'd be very careful about making threats, she said, her voice dropping to Arctic temperatures. Tyler's fingers flew across his tablet, recording, documenting, building their case against me. Your severance package includes a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Violating it would be inadvisable. The security guard shifted, a subtle reminder of my new status. Not employee. Threat. You're scared, I said, the realization hitting me with sudden clarity. This isn't about restructuring. What are you covering up? Martha stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. You have 14 minutes now. Don't make this harder than necessary. The walk to my office, my former office, felt like a perp walk. The security guard stayed 3 feet behind me, close enough that my colleagues noticed, far enough to maintain the illusion of dignity. Heads turned, then quickly looked away. The workplace equivalent of seeing a car accident, horrified fascination mixed with relief, it wasn't them. I pulled a banker's box from the supply closet, the cardboard rough against my trembling hands. 25 years. And they gave me 15 minutes and a box. My personal items were pathetically few. A photo of my parents at their 40th anniversary. A coffee mug from a conference in 2010. A small succulent that had somehow survived despite my neglect. The detritus of a life surrendered to corporate machinery. As I reached for my laptop, the security guard cleared his throat. That stays. My personal files. Nothing from the computer. Ms. Klein's orders. I left the laptop but palmed the USB drive hidden behind my monitor, the one I'd used for quick backups when the server was slow. Old habit. It slipped into my pocket as I pretended to adjust my blazer. The elevator ride down felt endless. 32 floors of descent, each one a year I'd never get back. The security guard watched the numbers decrease, avoiding eye contact. Even he seemed uncomfortable with this particular execution. The lobby stretched before me like a canyon, every click of my heels on marble echoing my humiliation. Former colleagues averted their eyes. The receptionist I'd trained 5 years ago suddenly found her computer screen fascinating. The revolving door expelled me onto the Denver street like the building itself was rejecting a transplant. March wind cut through my blazer, and I realized I'd left my coat in the office. 25 years. And I didn't even get to keep my coat. I stood on the sidewalk, holding my pathetic box, watching the lunch crowd flow around me like water around a stone. My phone buzzed, corporate email already deactivated, access revoked, digital existence erased. But they'd made one mistake. They'd given me 3 months of severance, 3 months of health insurance, 3 months to play nice. They should have killed me outright. Because standing there in the Colorado cold, feeling the weight of that USB drive in my pocket, I made a decision. They thought they were eliminating a position. What they'd actually done was create an enemy who knew exactly where they were vulnerable. If I've lost everything, I whispered to the indifferent street, then you have everything to lose. The war had begun. They just didn't know it yet. The USB drive sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days, untouched, like a loaded gun I wasn't ready to fire. I spent those days in a grief-drunk haze, alternating between rage and wine, between plotting revenge and wondering if I'd imagined my own importance. But on the 4th day, sober and sharp with sleepless clarity, I plugged it in. The files bloomed across my laptop screen. Quarterly reports, audit preparations, client communications, mundane debris of corporate life, except for the patterns only I would recognize. The threads I'd spent decades weaving and reweaving to hide the rot underneath. Memory is a strange thing. Trauma sharpens it, makes it cut both ways. I remembered the Donnelly contract from 2015, a construction project for low-income housing that received federal subsidies. Except the houses were never built. The land sat empty while the money vanished into a maze of subcontractors that existed only on paper. I'd flagged it initially, brought concerns to Richard. Sometimes bureaucracy moves slowly, he'd said, his hand paternal on my shoulder. Let's give it another quarter before we raise any alarms. Another quarter became another year. The files were quietly archived. The land was sold to one of Richard's golf buddies for a shopping complex. The federal inquiry that should have followed never materialized. Someone higher up the food chain had been fed different numbers. My numbers. I remembered the workplace accident in 2018. Miguel Reyes, a maintenance worker, fell down an elevator shaft that shouldn't have been accessible. The safety protocols I'd seen filed with OSHA were fiction. I knew because I'd helped create the documentation after the fact. Backdating inspection reports. Manufacturing a paper trail of compliance that never existed. Miguel died on impact. His widow received a settlement that bought her silence but not peace. The incident was filed as employee negligence. Martha had handled that one personally, her efficiency as cold as the morgue where Miguel's body had been stored. These things are tragic, she'd said during the crisis meeting, but we can't let one person's mistake destroy hundreds of jobs. One person's mistake. As if Miguel had chosen to fall through floors of negligence and greed. The USB contained fragments, hints, shadows of these transactions. But I knew where the real bodies were buried, in the secure servers on the 34th floor, in the locked filing cabinets in Martha's office, in the encrypted drives Richard thought no one else could access. I'd built those encryptions. I'd organized those files. I'd created the very system they used to hide their crimes, which meant I knew how to tear it all down. The Parker Fund materialized in my memory like a photograph developing in reverse, from clear image to damning negative. 2019, an internal investment fund for employee retirement, managed directly by Halden & Co. 2. Maximize returns for our family. Except the fund was a piggy bank for executive bonuses. The returns employees saw were fictional, numbers on statements, while their actual contributions funded Richard's third yacht and Martha's house in Aspen. I'd questioned the structure once, early on, when I still believed in coincidences. It's complicated financial structuring, our CFO had explained, his smile as thin as the paperwork. Above your pay grade, Emily. Just keep the numbers clean. So I had. I'd kept them so clean they sparkled, hiding the theft underneath. Every memory brought another. A cascade of complicity. The environmental violations covered up with doctored reports. The sexual harassment settlements that never appeared in any official record. The city councilman who suddenly voted for Halden's tax breaks after his son miraculously got into Harvard despite failing grades. Harvard, where Richard sat on the board of trustees. I'd been the silencer, the eraser, the one who made problems disappear into numerical ether. But I'd also been the archivist. You see, they never understood my real value. They saw me as a sophisticated calculator, a human spreadsheet that could be replaced by the right software or a younger, cheaper graduate. They never realized I wasn't just processing their crimes, I was memorizing them. Every off-the-books transaction had a trigger, a tell. Richard always scheduled his calls with Beijing when something illegal was about to be buried. Martha ordered flowers for the office when she was nervous about an audit. The legal team worked late on Thursdays when preparing to obstruct investigations. 25 years of tells, and I knew them all. I pulled out a legal pad, the yellow paper harsh under my desk lamp. I started writing, not the evidence itself, but the map to find it. Account numbers that didn't appear in any official ledger. File names that seemed innocuous but contained damning proof. The location of servers that weren't supposed to exist. The Morrison account I'd mentioned to Martha. That was my masterpiece of deception. A shell company buying distressed properties, fixing them with suburban renewal grants, then selling them to Halden subsidiaries at massive profits. The government thought they were revitalizing communities. In reality, they were funding our executives' bonuses while pushing out low-income families. I'd structured it so well that even the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had looked at it and seen nothing wrong. Because I'd made sure they were looking at the wrong things. But I kept copies, small discrepancies, emails sent from personal accounts, voice memos of Richard explaining what he really wanted done with the Morrison funds. Insurance, I'd told myself. Protection. Now they would be weapons. The sun was setting over Denver, painting the mountains the color of old blood. Fitzgerald jumped onto my lap, purring with the simple contentment of a creature who'd never betrayed anyone. I scratched behind his ears and continued writing. By midnight, I had 12 pages of breadcrumbs, a trail that led through 25 years of corporate malfeasance to enough federal crimes to bury Halden & Co. in litigation for decades. They'd severed me like a tumor, not realizing I'd metastasized through their entire system. Every crime they'd committed had passed through my hands, and my hands had very good memory. I looked at the non-disclosure agreement Martha had sent over, sitting unopened in my email. 3 months of severance to buy my silence. They couldn't afford me. Because I finally understood what 25 years at Halden & Co. had taught me. Loyalty is a luxury only the powerful can afford. The rest of us have leverage, and I was about to use every ounce of mine. The first rule of corporate espionage: use their arrogance against them. Halden and Co. had disabled my official access, but they'd forgotten about the vendors, the contractors, the third-party systems I'd helped integrate over the years. The document management system we used for archives. I'd set up the account myself in 2008 using a generic admin email that still received password reset notifications. At 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, I reset that password. The archives opened before me like a tomb, dusty with digital neglect. Nobody looked at files older than 5 years unless subpoenaed, which meant nobody had noticed the automatic backup protocol I'd instituted in 2016, copying everything to a redundant cloud server for disaster recovery purposes. Richard had signed off on it without reading. He always did when I used enough technical jargon. I downloaded selectively, surgically, the Donnelly files, the Parker Fund documentation, the real safety inspection reports from before Miguel Reyes died. Each download was a scalpel cut, precise, and deliberate. But I needed more than old files. I needed current intelligence, proof that the corruption wasn't history, but ongoing malignancy. That's when I remembered Kevin Zhao. Kevin had been my analyst for 3 years before Martha forced him out, supposedly for performance issues. Actually for asking too many questions about the Morrison account. Smart kid, MIT graduate, the kind of analytical mind that saw patterns whether you wanted him to or not. I found him on LinkedIn, working for a nonprofit investigating corporate fraud. The irony was delicious. We met at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, far from downtown's glass towers. Kevin looked older, harder around the edges, but his eyes sharpened when he saw me. "Emily Carter," he said. Not quite a greeting. "I wondered when you'd wake up." "I was fired," I said simply. "No, you were sacrificed." He pulled out a laptop, its case covered in activist stickers. "They're cleaning house before the merger." "What merger?" His laugh was bitter coffee and burned bridges. "Blackstone Equity. They're buying Halden and Co. for $3 billion. But first, they need to pass due diligence, which means anyone who knows where the bodies are buried gets buried themselves," I finished. Kevin turned his laptop toward me. "I've been tracking them since they pushed me out. Look." The screen showed a timeline. 17 terminations in the past 6 months, all senior staff with access to sensitive financial information. All given generous severance packages with ironclad NDAs. "You're number 18, Kevin said. "Martha's assistant Tyler, he's next. Then probably Davidson from legal." They weren't restructuring, they were sanitizing. "I have files," I said carefully. "But I need more. Current communications, especially about the merger." Kevin's smile was sharp as code. "I might know someone. Janine from IT security. She's still inside, but she's seen enough to know what's coming. She might help. For the right reason." "What's the right reason?" "Her brother was Miguel Reyes." The name hung between us like a prayer for the dead. Janine met us 3 days later, after work, at a bar that catered to the after-work crowd. She looked like she hadn't slept in months, her eyes hollowed by grief and rage. "They gave my family $200,000, she said, her voice flat. "For a man's life. For a father of 3. 200,000, and a paper that says we can never speak about it. Help us," I said, "and we'll make them pay in more than money." She slid a flash drive across the table, her hand trembling. "Email backups from the past month. Martha's assistant has been sloppy with the server permissions. This includes everything about the merger, and something else, something worse." I raised an eyebrow. "They're selling the pension fund data to Blackstone before the merger. Employee social security numbers, financial histories, everything. Blackstone's using it to assess human capital risks. It's illegal as hell." My stomach turned. They weren't just eliminating us, they were selling us. Back in my apartment, I built my case like I once built their lies, meticulously, comprehensively, with the kind of attention to detail that had made me invaluable. I created multiple copies, encrypted and stored across different cloud services. One copy went into a safety deposit box at a bank Halden didn't use. Another to my attorney, not the corporate-friendly one they'd recommended, but a former prosecutor who specialized in white-collar crime. If anything happens to me, I told her, release everything. She reviewed the files, her face paling with each page. This is RICO territory. This is federal prison territory. I know, I said. I helped build it. The plan formed like a photograph in developer solution, slowly gaining definition and depth. I wouldn't just expose them. I'd orchestrate their destruction with the same precision I'd once used to protect them. But I needed one more thing. A platform. The media would be essential. But not just any journalist. I needed someone hungry, credible, and connected enough to ensure the story couldn't be buried. Kevin knew someone. Of course he did. Daniel Brooks, he said. Former Wall Street Journal, now independent. He's been investigating Blackstone for 2 years. This would be his Pulitzer. I smiled, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. They'd created me, shaped me into the perfect weapon against them. 25 years of training in their methods, their weaknesses, their fears. Martha had been right about one thing. This was business. But she'd been wrong about it not being personal. Everything about this was personal. Every document I'd gathered, every contact I'd made, every late night mapping their vulnerabilities. It was all personal. They'd taken my life. I was going to take their empire. The USB drive sat on my kitchen counter again, no longer a loaded gun but a lit fuse. The explosion was coming. I just needed to make sure I was far enough away when it detonated. Richard Halden was about to learn what 25 years of loyalty looked like when it turned to vengeance. And Martha Klein was about to discover that some things couldn't be restructured away. The real work was about to begin. The first warning came through my apartment door at 3 a.m. Not a knock, but a note, slipped underneath like a whisper of threat. Some stones are better left unturned. Your severance can be improved. Call Martha. I photographed it, sent it to my lawyer, then burned it in my sink. The smoke detector shrieked, and I let it. Let the neighbors wonder. Let them remember the night Emily Carter started fighting back. The second warning was less subtle. I'd been shopping at Whole Foods, lost in the mundane comfort of choosing produce, when I noticed him, gray suit, forgettable face, following me since the parking lot. He stayed 3 aisles behind, always browsing, never buying. I abandoned my cart and walked straight toward him. He turned away, suddenly interested in organic pasta. But I saw the earpiece, the tactical shoes, the way his jacket hung heavy on one side. Private security. Probably Blackwater. Richard had connections there from his defense contracting days. Tell Richard I got his message, I said loudly enough for other shoppers to hear. Tell him it's too late. The man left without a word, but I knew there would be others. They escalated quickly. My car tires slashed in broad daylight. My internet cutting out whenever I tried to upload files. Phone calls at all hours, breathing, silence, then disconnection. Amateur hour intimidation tactics, but effective in their persistence. Janine called me, panicked. They know I took something. Martinez from security cornered me in the parking garage, asking about unauthorized access. I think they're going to fire me. Let them, I said. Document everything. Record conversations if you can. Their paranoia is evidence. But Kevin worried me more. He'd gone dark for 3 days before surfacing with a black eye and a split lip. Random mugging, he said. But his hands shook as he lifted his coffee. They got my laptop. Good thing I keep everything in the cloud. Good thing. But the message was clear. We were vulnerable in ways Halden & Co. wasn't. I changed tactics. If they wanted to play predator, I'd become something harder to hunt, a ghost with teeth. I moved out of my apartment, telling the landlord I was visiting family. Instead, I bounced between cheap motels, paying cash, registering under different names. I bought 3 prepaid phones, used public Wi-Fi, became digitally nomadic. The paranoia was exhausting, but necessary. Every car in my rear view could be surveillance. Every new face at the coffee shop could be their asset. I started carrying pepper spray, a knife, and a body camera that uploaded directly to the cloud. Martha called exactly once, from her personal cell. Emily, this has gotten out of hand. We can discuss a better arrangement. 6 months severance, a glowing recommendation. $1 million, I interrupted. Cash, and a written confession of the Morrison fraud. Silence, then, you've lost your mind. No. Martha, I've found my spine. Your move. She hung up. An hour later, my former coworker Lisa texted me. Security just searched your old office with actual police. What the hell did you do? They'd called in law enforcement, probably claiming I'd stolen proprietary information. A preemptive strike to discredit me. Smart, but not smart enough. My lawyer had already filed a whistleblower complaint with the SEC, establishing legal protection before they could paint me as a thief. The game intensified. I was leaving a FedEx office after sending another backup drive to my attorney when I noticed the black SUV. It had been 3 cars behind me for the last 4 turns. I pulled into a police station parking lot and waited. The SUV drove past without slowing, but I saw the passenger taking photos. That night, I called Daniel Brooks from a burner phone. They're getting desperate, I told him. How soon can you publish? I need 2 more sources for confirmation. Journalistic standards. Standards won't matter if I'm dead. Don't be dramatic. Daniel, they killed Miguel Reyes over a safety violation. I'm threatening a $3 billion merger. Do the math. He was quiet for a moment. Give me 48 hours. And Emily? Don't go anywhere alone. But alone was all I had. Kevin was terrified. Janine had been fired and was laying low. My family thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. But it was the lucid kind. The type that sees clearly in the dark. I spent those 48 hours in a maze of my own construction. Coffee shops, to libraries, to hotel lobbies. Never staying anywhere long enough to become a pattern. I watched every reflection, noted every repeated face, trusted absolutely no one. The final escalation came through my mother. Emily, honey, her voicemail said, confused and worried. Someone from your company called. They said you're having mental health issues, that you've been making threats. They offered to pay for treatment if I could convince you to get help. What's going on? They'd crossed the final line. Threatening me was business. Involving my family was war. I called Martha from the lobby of a Marriott using the hotel phone. You contacted my mother, I said without preamble. We're concerned about your well-being. 47 hours from now, the Wall Street Journal, the Denver Post, and the FBI will receive everything, every document, every recording, every trail of breadcrumbs leading back to you and Richard. Unless what? Unless you resign. Publicly. Citing personal reasons. Richard, too. And the merger dies. She laughed. Actually laughed. You're nobody. Emily. A disgruntled former employee with delusions. I'm the woman who made your crimes invisible for 25 years, which means I'm the only one who can make them visible again. 47 hours. Martha. Tick-tock. I hung up and walked out into the Denver afternoon. A new SUV was waiting across the street, not even trying to hide anymore. I smiled and waved at the tinted windows, then held up my phone, showing them I was recording. They wanted me to run, to hide, to crumble under the pressure. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I'd survived 25 years in their meat grinder. I'd been forged in their furnace of corporate brutality. I wasn't running. I was counting down. 46 hours and 59 minutes to go. Daniel Brooks didn't look like a crusader. He looked like an accountant who'd taken a wrong turn into journalism. Wire-rimmed glasses, forgettable brown hair, the kind of face that could disappear in any crowd. Which is exactly what made him dangerous to people like Richard Halden. We met at Union Station during rush hour, surrounded by enough commuters to make surveillance difficult. He chose a table in the center of the food court, visible from every angle. No corners for shadows to hide. You look terrible, he said, studying my face. 20 minutes of sleep and constant paranoia will do that. I slid him a flash drive across the table. Everything's there, 25 years of evidence. He pocketed it smoothly. I've been digging into Blackstone's side. You're right about the merger being a cleanup operation. But it's bigger than Halden & Co. They're doing this with 4 other acquisitions. Your company is part of a pattern. How big? $15 billion in questionable assets being laundered through legitimate purchases. The FBI has been circling for months, but they need an insider. You're their gift from heaven. He pulled out his phone, showing me a draft article. The headline made my pulse quicken. The Architect of Deception: How One Woman Built and Destroyed a Corporate Crime Empire. Dramatic, I said. Accurate. Emily, what you've documented here, this isn't just corporate fraud. This is systematic economic terrorism against your own employees, your community. The pension fund alone affected 3,000 families. 3,000 families. I'd known the number intellectually, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. 3,000 retirements destroyed while Richard bought another yacht. There's something else, Daniel continued, lowering his voice. My source at the FBI says Martha Klein booked a flight to Grand Cayman for tomorrow night. One-way ticket. She was running. The Ice Queen was melting under pressure. We need to publish before she leaves, I said. I need one more confirmation. Someone currently inside Halden who can verify the recent documents. Without that, they'll claim everything is fabricated, old news, or taken out of context. I thought of Tyler, Martha's assistant, next on the chopping block according to Kevin's timeline. Young, ambitious, and probably terrified as he watched the executioner's axe swing closer. I might know someone, I said. Tyler agreed to meet at a Starbucks in Cherry Creek, far from downtown's watching eyes. He arrived 15 minutes late, sweating despite the March cold. His usual collegiate confidence cracked like cheap veneer. Ms. Carter, he started, then stopped, looking around nervously. I shouldn't be here. But you are, I said gently. Because you know what they're planning for you. His hands trembled around his venti latte. Martha had me book conference room C for next Tuesday. With security. The same room where they fired me, and 17 others. He nodded, looking younger than his 26 years. She had me prepare a severance package for myself. She doesn't know I saw it. They're eliminating my position next week. Help us, and you won't need their severance. You don't understand. These people, they destroy anyone who opposes them. My student loans, my apartment, everything is tied to this job. Daniel leaned forward. Tyler, in 48 hours, Halden & Co. won't exist in its current form. The FBI is already building a case. You can be a witness or a co-conspirator. Your choice. Tyler's moral crisis played across his face like a time-lapse film. Fear, anger, calculation, and finally, resignation. What do you need? He asked. Current emails about the merger, specifically, anything showing they knew about the fraud before the Blackstone deal. I have access to Martha's email. She has me sort her inbox. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm forwarding you something right now. An email chain between Martha, Richard, and Blackstone's CFO. They discuss legacy liabilities that need sanitization before close. They list every illegal transaction you've documented. Emily, they knew. They all knew. The smoking gun delivered by the very assistant they'd planned to sacrifice. Poetry. Daniel's phone buzzed with the forwarded emails. He read quickly, his expression shifting from professional interest to genuine shock. Jesus Christ, they're not just covering up past crimes. They're planning to gut the company post-merger, sell off assets, and leave employees with nothing. The pension fund isn't just compromised, it's already gone. They've been using it as collateral for private loans. Tyler went pale. My mother works in accounting. She's been there 15 years. Her retirement is gone. I finished. Along with thousands of others. unless we stop them. That night, I didn't sleep. Daniel was writing, fact-checking, building an article that would detonate like a smart bomb in Halden's executive suite. Tyler was secretly copying everything he could access, burning bridges with every forwarded email. Kevin and Janine were preparing their testimonies for the FBI. And I sat in my motel room, watching the clock, waiting for the dawn that would end Richard Halden's empire. My phone rang at 11 p.m. Richard himself, his voice bourbon smooth and rattlesnake dangerous. "Emily, let's discuss this like civilized people." "Civilized people don't destroy lives for profit." "Richard, everyone's hands are dirty here, including yours. You think you'll emerge from this clean? You were the architect. Emily, every crime we committed has your fingerprints on it." "I know," I said simply. "I'm prepared for consequences. Are you?" "You're destroying your own legacy. 25 years of work, 25 years of lies. Your lies, Richard. I just did the math." Silence stretched between us, filled with decades of unspoken truths. "The article publishes tomorrow," I said. "The FBI already has everything. It's over." "You stupid bitch," he snarled, the mask finally dropping completely. "You have no idea what you've done. The people I answer to, they don't accept failure. This won't end with me." "Then I guess you better run. Martha's already got her ticket." I hung up on him. 25 years of deference ended with the press of a button. The countdown was almost over. In 12 hours, Daniel's article would go live, the FBI would move, the empire would fall. I thought about the 3,000 families who'd lost their retirements, Miguel Reyes's children growing up without a father, Kevin's black eye, Janine's hollowed grief. Tomorrow, they'd have their justice, and I'd have my revenge. The article went live at 6 a.m. Mountain Time, perfectly timed for the East Coast morning news cycle. I watched from my motel room as my phone exploded with notifications, the story spreading like wildfire through financial Twitter, LinkedIn, and every major news outlet. The headline screamed across my laptop screen: "Denver financial giant built on fraud. Insider reveals 25 years of systematic crime at Halden & Co." Daniel had crafted a masterpiece of investigative journalism. Every allegation supported by documents, every crime traced through financial records, every victim given a voice. Miguel Reyes's widow was quoted extensively. The 3,000 employees whose pensions had vanished were represented by their union leader, calling for immediate federal intervention. By 7 a.m., Halden & Co. The stock price had dropped 40% in pre-market trading. By 8 a.m., the FBI had arrived at the Apex Tower. I watched the live news coverage from a diner downtown, surrounded by morning commuters, obliviously eating their eggs and bacon while an empire crumbled 6 blocks away. The reporter stood in front of the building I'd entered every day for 25 years, describing the scene as federal agents carried out boxes of evidence. Sources indicate that CEO Richard Halden and HR Director Martha Klein are both considered persons of interest in what the FBI is calling one of the largest corporate fraud cases in Colorado history. My burner phone rang. Tyler, breathless with panic and exhilaration. "They're here. The FBI is everywhere. They've locked down the entire 34th floor." Martha tried to leave, but they stopped her at the elevator. "Emily, Richard isn't here. Security says he never came in." Of course he hadn't. Rats flee sinking ships. But Martha hadn't been fast enough. Her Grand Cayman escape was now a federal fugitive flight that would never take off. The news cut to a live shot of Martha being escorted out in handcuffs. Her perfect composure finally shattered. She looked older, smaller, her designer suit wrinkled like paper trash. Her eyes found the camera, and I saw it. The recognition that her carefully constructed world had been demolished by the nobody she'd dismissed with 17 words. The story dominated the news cycle. CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business. Every channel had panels of experts discussing the implications. The Blackstone merger was dead. Trading in Halden stock was suspended. The Colorado Attorney General announced a full investigation, but the true avalanche came from inside. Employees who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. The floodgates Daniel had opened became a tsunami of whistleblowers. Every buried secret, every small corruption, every abuse of power came pouring out. Lisa from accounting revealed the executive bonus scheme that had siphoned millions while employees took pay cuts. Mark from legal admitted to destroying documents related to environmental violations. Even the security guard who'd escorted me out came forward, sharing recordings of executives discussing employee eliminations. By noon, Halden Crimes was trending nationally. Daniel called, his voice electric with vindication. "Emily, the FBI wants to meet with you. You're not a target, you're their star witness. The immunity deal is already drafted." "What about Richard?" "Still missing, but they've frozen his assets and issued a warrant. He won't get far." I thought about Richard's threat, the people he answered to, but that was tomorrow's problem. Today was for watching the empire burn. The afternoon brought more revelations. A junior analyst found the real books, the ones even I hadn't seen, showing the full scope of the theft. Not 3,000 employees affected, 10,000 across subsidiaries I didn't even know existed. The union announced a class action lawsuit. The SEC launched a formal investigation. The Colorado State Pension Fund, which had invested heavily in Halden, demanded an emergency audit. Kevin texted me a photo from outside the Apex Tower. Hundreds of employees stood in the plaza, some crying, some angry, all of them realizing they'd been victims of the place they'd devoted their careers to. But among them, I saw something else: relief. The toxic secret they'd all carried. The knowledge that something was rotten but feeling powerless to address it was finally in the open. By evening, Martha had been formally charged with 15 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Her lawyer, the same one who'd handled Miguel Reyes's settlement, tried to claim she was a scapegoat, but the emails Tyler had provided destroyed that defense. The news showed her house in Aspen, already wrapped in police tape. Her art collection, bought with stolen pension funds, would be seized and liquidated. The life she'd built on others' losses was being dismantled piece by piece. Richard was arrested at a private airfield in Nebraska, trying to flee in a chartered jet. The footage of him being dragged from the plane, fighting and cursing, was played on loop. The composed executive who'd run an empire was reduced to a common criminal caught in the act. That night, I sat in my motel room, watching the coverage continue. Every channel, every news site, every social media platform was dissecting the story. The company that had defined my adult life was dead, killed by the truth I'd helped reveal. My personal phone, silent for days, had hundreds of messages. Former colleagues, some thanking me, others cursing me, journalists wanting exclusive interviews, lawyers offering to represent me in civil suits. But the message that mattered came from Janine Reyes. "My brother can rest now. Thank you for giving him justice." I turned off the TV and sat in the darkness. 25 years of my life had built their criminal empire. It had taken less than 24 hours to destroy it. Tomorrow would bring depositions, testimony, and the long process of legal justice. There would be consequences for me too. Immunity didn't mean innocence, and I'd have to live with my complicity. But tonight, in this cheap motel room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. I felt free. The count had reached 0. The explosion was complete, and from the ashes of Halden and Co., maybe something honest could finally grow. 6 months later, I walked through downtown Denver as autumn painted the city in shades of amber and rust. The Apex Tower still stood, but the floors that once housed Halden and Co. were dark, empty. A for-lease sign hung where Richard's name had once gleamed in bronze. The trials were ongoing. Richard got 25 years, one for each year I'd given them. Poetic justice, the newspapers called it. Martha received 15 years and would serve every day. The others fell like dominoes, each confession leading to another arrest, another revelation. I'd testified for 3 weeks straight, every detail of every crime laid bare in federal court. The prosecutor called me instrumental to justice. Richard's lawyer called me a vindictive architect of destruction. Both were right. The employees got partial restitution from the seized assets. Not everything, never everything, but enough for dignity. Miguel Reyes's family received a proper settlement. His death finally acknowledged as corporate homicide rather than employee error. I couldn't get my old life back. That Emily Carter, the one who'd believed in corporate loyalty and patient sacrifice, was dead. But maybe that was the gift hidden in the curse. Kevin started a nonprofit helping corporate whistleblowers. Janine went back to school, studying law with the fury of someone who'd seen injustice firsthand. Tyler, surprisingly, became a journalist, following in Daniel's footsteps, determined to prevent another Halden and Co. And me? I became a ghost who refused to disappear. I consult now, teaching companies how to spot internal fraud. It's ironic, using the skills I'd perfected in darkness to bring light. The money isn't what it was, but it's clean. I sleep without wine. I answer to no one but my conscience. Sometimes I walk past the Apex Tower and remember the woman who'd entered those doors every morning for 25 years. She'd been so certain that dedication would be rewarded, that loyalty meant something, that the numbers she manipulated were just numbers. That woman learned the hardest truth. In corporate America, loyalty flows upward while consequences flow down. The executives who preach family values will orphan you without blinking. The companies that demand your life will take it, then delete your access badge like you never existed. But she also learned this. Every empire built on lies carries the seeds of its own destruction. Every crime leaves evidence. Every villain creates their own nemesis. They created me. 25 years of training in their methods, their systems, their weaknesses. They taught me how to hide bodies in spreadsheets, how to make millions disappear, how to construct elaborate facades of legitimacy. They just never imagined I'd use those skills against them. Standing on the street where I'd been expelled with my pathetic box of belongings, I pulled out my phone. A text from Daniel. Second company just fell. Your documentation methods are becoming the FBI's playbook. You're changing how corporate crime gets prosecuted. I thought about Richard in his federal cell, stripped of his handmade suits and Swiss watches. Martha in her orange jumpsuit, that practiced smile finally gone. They'd taken everything from me with 17 words. I'd taken everything from them with the truth. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, indifferent to human schemes and suffering. But the city between us and those peaks, that was changing. Other companies were conducting internal audits, terrified they harbored their own Emily Carters. Whistleblower protections were being strengthened. The story of Halden and Co. had become a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. I'd lost 25 years, but maybe those years hadn't been wasted. They'd been ammunition, stored and waiting for the right moment to fire. A young woman passed me, heading into the Apex Tower, probably for an interview at one of the remaining companies. She carried the same eager hope I'd once held, that same belief in corporate promises. I wanted to stop her, to warn her, but I didn't. She'd learn. They all would. And maybe, if she was smart, she'd keep her own records, make her own copies, prepare her own insurance. Maybe she'd remember Emily Carter, the nobody who brought down an empire with a USB drive and the courage to speak. I walked away from the tower for the last time, no longer looking back. The war was over. I'd won. Not because I'd gotten revenge. Revenge is never truly satisfying. I'd won because I'd reclaimed something they'd tried to steal, my story. For 25 years, I'd been a ghostwriter for their crimes. Now, finally, I was the author of my own truth. They'd given me 17 words. Due to necessary restructuring following recent economic challenges, we're eliminating several positions. Yours is among them. I'd given them their ending. They took 25 years of my life. I took everything else. The ledger was balanced. The books were finally, honestly, closed. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Emily's position? Your perspectives make these stories come alive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep fighting, and remember, sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one taking notes.